Is you have 30 minutes for your presentation? Just kidding. And so before you. Yes.
Story time.
Good morning. It is May 9th. We're here in the Commissioner Board meeting room. We have a full slate of commissioners. We have our administrator, and we have our consultant, along with the clerk of the board. And at this time, I'll call the meeting to order and ask everyone to please rise and join in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, I'd like to add a item to the agenda right after our consent. It is the certificate of appreciation for Senator Nikki Torres. That'll be added to the agenda right after the consent. So at this time,
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Peck.
if we're going to open the agenda for additional items, I'd like to add an item on next week's agenda, which will be a certificate of appreciation for Senator Benke, who represents a good part and a majority of the people of Franklin County in the state Senate. Thank you.
That will be for next week's meeting. This is this week's meeting. We're adding an item there. So with that, we'll move down to approval of vouchers.
So we have one today, fund expenditures. Move for approval of fund expenditures in the total amount of $366,317.94 as presented. And note that it has been reviewed and signed by two representatives of the auditor's office and the county administrator.
Second.
There have been a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Next on the agenda is the consent agenda. There are 4 items on the consent agenda.
Move for approval of consent agenda items 1 through 4 as presented.
Second.
Been a motion and a second for the 4 items on the consent agenda with no announcement for discussion. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Move down to certificate of appreciation, Senator Nikki Torres. Mr. Gonzalez.
Yeah, I do want to recognize Senator Nikki Torres. She thought it was virtual, and I think I may have miscommunicated that to her, so she's not going to make it in, but I still do want to recognize her, and in regard to what Commissioner Peck said, I do agree, and that was my intent, to recognize all our elected officials in our region, because, you know, they've really done, I think, a fantastic job representing us in this year's legislative session. So perhaps we can get all the folks together at one time, but in particular, I did want to recognize Senator Torres, who's really made her life in the Mid-Columbia. And I'm going to read a little bit from her bio because it's really impressive, and we'll try to get her here next Tuesday. It says she's proud to represent the people of the 15th Legislative District, elected to the State Senate in 2022. Torres, a longtime community leader dedicated to the progress of ag, economic development, and education. She attended Pasco High, so she's a Pasco gal. She holds a master's degree. And, you know, I've known Nikki for many years, and I really did want to represent her, really recognize her, because not only is she a great senator and a great citizen, but she's the first Latina to represent us here in Pasco on the Senate. So that's a big deal, especially when you have a community that's 55% Latino. So she's really stepped up to the challenge. She's somebody that really represents the people of Franklin County and in the state for that matter. So certainly wanted to recognize her for her accomplishments. And she just texted me, and she's going to be here next Tuesday. So really looking forward to seeing her in person. But I do agree with Commissioner Peck. We do need to recognize all our legislators and our senators who have really stepped up to the challenge this year. So thank you.
All right. Next on the agenda is public comment. Anybody in the room for public comment? Anybody on the phone?
We do have Nikki on the phone. She was able to call in. So Senator Torres, I'm glad you're able to call on the phone. Can you hear us?
Hold, please.
Senator Torres, can you hear us? Glad you're able to call in.
Oh, yes. Thank you so much, Mike. I appreciate it. Oh, my gosh. I apologize for the confusion. I can definitely try to make it in next Tuesday if you prefer.
We'd love to have you.
But thank you, and thanks for the kind words and the recognition. That was very sweet of you. It was an exciting first session, learned a lot, and it was great to collaborate with many other senators that were there as well. And this was the first time for many to be in person. You know, the past 2 years, they weren't able to really be in person. There was only a select group that was able to be there last year because of the pandemic restrictions. But this is the first for many. So it's been 2 years since many have been in person. And then, of course, with elections, it was the first time for many of us. So even though I was the freshman of the senators, the true freshman, it was the first time for a lot of others as well. So it was great camaraderie, great teamwork. We got a lot of good bipartisan bills that were passed and capital budget requests as well that are good for Pasco. So I'm really excited for that. And to continue the work as well. And so we'll be looking forward to working with the county and the city to keep, requests moving through with help that you may need here in the near future.
All right.
Well, thank you, Senator, and I actually think you guys will be in a special session next Tuesday, from what I understand. So maybe we can coordinate something the following Tuesday. So I'm sure you're aware of that, but thanks again for joining us.
Yeah, thank you. It sounds like it will be virtual though, so
Okay.
It might work out for us.
Okay, so maybe we will see you. So we'll get it coordinated and make sure that you're here in person. And it is a night meeting next Tuesday, but I'll make sure we coordinate. So thank you so much, and really appreciate your service.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mike. I appreciate yours as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Nikki, and keep up the good fight.
Thank you so much. Have a good day, and thank you all as well for all your hard work.
Thank you. Is there anybody else in the room for public comment, or anybody else on the phone?
Commissioners, good morning.
Good morning.
Dave Cortines, I'm in constituent of Brad Peck's district, and I'm here today as a constituent and a resident of this county, not as a publisher, not as a writer. It's unethical for me to come here and insert myself in your meeting with concerns and issues that I've been watching and following and investigating, and I've done that. And I wanted to take a few seconds here where I watched a couple of your meetings where you have brought up, Mr. Mullen has brought up the issue of the FIBA. And as an investigative reporter, I do my homework and my work before I go out to the public. And I know there were some loopholes that were trying to be used, and I know that in my investigation that these dollars that were taken by the commissioners while they're in office was unethical. Now, did they break the law? That's up to the attorney to decide. And if our prosecuting attorney doesn't want to make a move on this, then you need to go a step higher. And that's what I did. I placed a couple of calls to the state attorney general's office, and I have a couple of friends there. They gave me some advice, gave me some information that I think that when you do something unethical, it also breaks the law if you're an elected official. And so I think that if our prosecuting attorney is not going to take a step or investigation on these dollars that were taken, actually taken legally, but unconstitutionally, and that the commissioners should advise their administrator to file a complaint with the Attorney General's office and move forward with that. I think Mr. Peck has said over and over and over that he listens to his constituents and he worries about the taxpayers' dollars. Well, these aren't taxpayers' dollars. These are dollars that they created for themselves to give themselves a raise, which is unethical. And when it's unethical, you make things right if you were involved in part of that. So I would advise Mr. Peck that he would do the right thing and be ethical about the situation. Write a check today for the $47,000 and then turn it back in. Mr. Attorney Brock, write his $20,000 check. I believe both of you had a small check that need to write too. If those checks haven't been written, they should be written today and turned back. So I'll come back and whatever other little bit I have to share with you in the next public comment. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else on the phone? Anybody else in the room? There is one on the phone? No? Okay. All right, with that, with nobody else coming to the mic, we'll move down to regular business. First item is 2023-139, removal of civil service examiner secretary duties from human resources and create a part-time civil service chief examiner secretary. Excuse me. Margot.
Good morning.
Good morning.
So the request in front of you is to create a part-time, freestanding position for the Civil Service Chief Examiner to remove those duties out of the HR department, and also as a budgetary transfer to cover the fiscal costs of paying that individual. So that is our request for you today, and I'm here to answer any questions you might have.
Questions, commissioners? So we're looking at about 7,000 a month, correct?
No, that would be for the remainder of the year.
That's for the remainder of the year.
Yes.
Okay, 32 hours a month, 21.39 per hour. And under whose direction will this chief examiner be then, since you're removing them from your office?
The overall position would fall under the county administrator office.
Okay,
The civil service chief examiner reports to the Civil Service Commission. It is actually up to the Civil Service Commission to select their civil service examiner by RCW standards. So, but it would fall ultimately under the county commissioner's office.
so it'd be underneath the administrators.
Yes,
Okay,
yes.
that's, go ahead, Mike.
I would say it, really gives us some separation from the examiner. I mean, essentially, my office provides this person with space, and not necessarily managing that individual, because it really is up to the Civil Service Commission to work with the examiner. And the chair of the civil service really is the boss of this examiner. So we certainly pay this person and provide them space, but the way I look at it, really, it's transparency, it's separation, it's the opportunity to really navigate autonomously without us being in their business. Civil service was created for fairness and equity, and to really get those 5 names certified and then get those to the sheriff's office as quickly and judiciously as possible.
All right. No other questions?
My only question is, you say it's an estimated, okay, never mind, I see it's 8 hours a week, not 32 hours.
Right, yeah, it's
I
8
see
hours a week.
that's
It's about
an awful
32
lot of
hours a
time
month.
for-
32 hours a month,
Yes, I see
8
that.
hours a week.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, so if there's no other discussion, I'll entertain a motion.
Move for approval of Resolution 2023-139 as presented.
Second.
There's been a motion and a second for Resolution 2023-139. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Moves us down to item B, initiating County Road Project 633 Vineyard Drive East, Bridge 886-2.74 replacement. Mr. Erdman.
Okay. Vineyard Drive East Bridge was awarded $1,598,400 from the FHWA Local Bridge Program towards replacement. This project is included in the 2023 annual construction program with an estimated total cost of $1,847,860, with a local match of between 0 and 13.5%, depending on where we meet obligation targets. The proposed project is to replace the existing 48-foot-long wooden bridge with a pre-stressed concrete structure. Public Works asks that the board initiate this project, followed by the approval of the local agency prospectus and agreement. Are there any questions I can answer?
Questions, commissioners?
Not a question, Craig, but on your prospectus, if you would just make a note, there's the block that says what DOT region it's in. Somehow it showed up as Southwest, it's South Central.
Oh, okay.
It's a minor thing, but we don't want the state hanging up the paperwork. over
No,
it.
I'll make a note.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you.
My only question is, on the total, it's $1,847,900, but back on the initial financial impact, it's $847,860. We're just rounding up on that, is all we're doing?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just wanted to make
And-
sure there's no
and,
hang up on that either.
Their costs for construction are never really cast in stone, but we hope that that's where we fall.
Okay. That was the only thing that I seen that was concerned.
So when they take the old bridge out and the old timbers, do you recycle those timbers or do you put them up for auction?
If they're salvageable and we have a use for them, we will hold on to them.
Okay.
Otherwise, if they're not serviceable, then they're just disposed of by the contractor.
All right. Thank you.
But we do find, if we have good timber, we do usually find a home for it eventually.
That's a wanted commodity nowadays.
Especially
People love
those
it.
old rough sawn timbers, they just don't make trees like they used to.
And even the ones that you may find that aren't constructionable, they're for visual. People put in their house just for visual.
Yeah,
So it might have value even though
yeah.
you don't see any structural strength in it.
Look to see if they have an outside value, if they aren't value to us.
There you go.
I think if you took them to the auction, like Booker auction, I think there's value there.
All righty, if there's no other discussion, I'll entertain a
Craig.
motion.
Craig, I'll just add a note. We've got a number of road project items on here today, so I'll just say it once up front. County Road Administration Board oversees the RAP program and the RATA programs and a lot of this funding that flows down. And the fact that your staff has done an outstanding job and stayed compliant with all the statutes and received your certificate of good practice, that's a process that goes unseen. But I just want to reinforce for the public's knowledge that if your team hadn't filled all the squares and hadn't been in compliance, virtually nearly all of these projects and dollars in the millions we're talking about today, we would not have been eligible.
That's correct.
It's a lot of money, and if you folks aren't on top of your game, this doesn't happen. So I just wanted that to be on the record.
I'm blessed with a good staff. They do stay on top of it. And practice makes perfect, and we've had a lot of practice.
Well, the Crab Board staff looks at a lot of things, and it's pretty black and white. You're either in compliance or you're not. So.
Thank you.
All right, if there's no further discussion, I'll entertain a motion.
Move for approval of Resolution 2023-130 as presented.
Second.
Been a motion and a second for 2023-130. Without further discussion, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Next, we have the approval of the same project. So I don't think we have to have any more discussion, but if, Craig, is there anything else you want to present?
These, it's just like last week, this is generally just a consent agenda item that initiates the project or contract with local programs. But because of our procedural methods, they're part of this package today.
Move for approval of Resolution 2023-131, project prospectus for County Road Project 633 Vineyard Drive.
Second.
There's been a motion and a second for 2023-131. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Moves us down to item D, initiating project agreement proposal CRP 635 Vineyard Drive West and North Railroad intersection. Mr. Erdman.
All right. This project is a part of that infrastructure improvement for the Ryman Industrial Center, like North Railroad Avenue that we brought last week. It has been awarded $1,529,800 of RATA funding through the Rural Arterial Program in the 23-24 funding cycle. The county has a 10% match of $152,980 with this batch of money. This project was added to the 2023-2028 Transportation Improvement Plan by Resolution Number 2822-243. The total estimated cost of the project is $2,381,000, with the remaining funds expected to be awarded in the 25-26 funding cycle, along with appropriate county matching funds. Public Works asks that the board initiate this project, followed by the approval of the RAP project agreement.
Commissioners, questions?
Move for approval of Resolution 2023-142, I believe is the number.
Yes. Second.
There's been a motion and a second for Resolution 2023-142. Discussion? The roadway that ties into Railroad Avenue, Vineyard Drive, I read in there where you're going to widen it and put turn lanes in it,
Yes.
and then you're going to make that approach, you're going to take off some of the severity of that hill, because I'm on that road a lot.
Yeah, I don't know if that's going to be part of the intersection project or part of the future phase of Vineyard going towards
Gotcha.
395. It might be. Right off the top of my head, I'm not sure if that was the part of this or we
It
went
did
back and forth.
speak of blind spots, and that's the blind
well,
spot.
then, yeah, we probably are going to trim that down
Okay,
in that phase.
that would be appreciated, because that's a dangerous
It
intersection.
will eventually get treated as we move forward, because we do intend taking Vineyard all-weather all the way to 395.
Good. All right. Is there any other questions?
No.
All right, we have a motion and a second for 2023-142. All in favor, say aye.
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 And takes us down to E, which is the approving project agreement, which is the same thing.
Move for approval of Resolution 2023-143 is presented.
Second.
There's been motion and a second for Resolution 2023-143. Without further discussion, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, that moves us down to item F, public hearing, Franklin County Vehicle Pool Internal Service Fund. And this doesn't have anybody presenting. Is this Tim?
It's going to be Tim. He's actually on his way from his office, but I can tee it up for him just a little bit until he gets there. I was just texting with him, and
So,
he's
Mr. Gonzalez, at this time, I will open the public hearing.
got it.
So please go ahead.
So essentially, this is creating the Franklin County Vehicle Pool Internal Service Fund and supplementing the total 2023 miscellaneous fund budget. So the fiscal impact, $10,000 would be transferred from current expense. The additional budgeted amount funded through other funds, current expense. So essentially, this sets up a budget for our vehicle pool. which is a little more than 100,000. You know, partly would go to gas, partly to service the vehicles. So there's the man of the hour, so I'll let him take it from here.
Mr. Anderson, thank you for your presence.
Thank you. Yes, as Mike just mentioned, it is a budgeting 125,000 of revenue and expense for the creation of this fund. Ultimately, it wouldn't. I mean, it may seem like a lot, but it's ultimately right now we don't have a ton of vehicles yet, but ultimately it won't be spent unless we'd have to receive the money from vehicles being used for it to be spent. So ultimately it was just trying to it was estimating. The estimates are essentially full, pretty much full usage throughout the rest of the year. All 5 vehicles, I think it was being used on pretty much a daily basis for that budget. And this was part of the travel policy that was revised, probably a month and a half ago. So this is the next step in that phase.
Tim, you want to tell about the 10,000? We need the 10,000.
Oh, yes, and then there's since initially there won't be funds in there to begin with until the vehicles are used, we need $10,000, which would be a transfer from current expense just as initial funding for the budget, just to get it off the ground.
Commissioners, questions?
Are there any expenses related to these vehicles that will not be covered by this fund?
Not to my knowledge.
So the departments aren't paying anything directly for the usage? Not paying for fuel, for example?
No, okay, they are paying into the fund too. That's where the revenue for this fund is coming from, for the fund to pay. So yes, I guess you're right. Yes, there is expenses in other departments. They're being charged for the mileage rate, the GSA rate for the miles that they use. So if they drive 200 miles on a day, then they'll be charged for 64.5 cents or whatever it is per mile that will get paid into that fund, which then makes it so that fund can pay for repairs and stuff that come up.
So in the last line of the recommendation, it says the expenditure lines being created would be, 3,200 fuel consumed. So just to be sure I have this right, as a department uses it, they pay so much per mile into the fund, and that mileage amount you just noted, I know, includes fuel. So the expenditure lines would just be for then the fuel to be paid for out of this account.
Correct.
And so the users would have a fuel card that is tied to this expenditure?
That is correct.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Is there any other discussion on this topic?
How many vehicles are in the pool right now?
I think there were 5 that were initially transferred.
Commissioner,
I have no further questions. My only question was, concerning the fuel, which was answered by Tim from Mr. Peck, so.
Mr. Davidson.
Commissioners, we just recently paid for some transfer of titles from the sheriff's office to the pool for these titles associated with these cars to expedite that and help the prosecutor out that was getting one of the vehicles and things. We needed to get that done quickly. So we paid for some of these expenses out of the county administrative budget, and we'll get reimbursed by this fund now for those. And so we're already incurring some expenses, and we'll do that properly so that the costs are reflective of where they should be once getting this $10,000 transferred in.
All right, if there's no other discussion on this, we have another item. We have two different items, but under the same public hearing because it deals with opening the budget. Is there anybody that would like to speak on behalf of the Franklin County Vehicle Pool Internal Service Fund? Anybody in the public? Okay, seeing none, we'll move down to the creation of a cumulative leave fund. Tim? Mr. Anderson?
Did you,
You want me to?
if you want to speak on that, that's fine. I did want to note on this that I think I mistakenly gave out wrong fund numbers for one of these funds, because we have both of these as 515. So we'd have to change, one of them could be 520. One of these two funds that,
So you had them both listed under 515?
apparently that's what I had given out.
So we need to separate them by, the first one will be 515, the second will be 520.
That would work.
Okay.
So this accumulated leave fund would be, I think the thought going forward would be to do the excess, the refund, admin refund levy through the treasurer's office to, the collections from that would go into this fund, which then could be used in the future. I don't think there's any plan for any spending this year, but in the future, it could be used to pay for cash outs when employees leave the county, as well as potentially allowing employees to cash out periods of a week or two, depending on what the commissioners would approve. Before Christmas, you could allow for 2 weeks to be cashed out so that employees would have some extra spending money at that time or whenever deemed by the commissioners. And so this would create that fund to be able to work towards that process.
Mr. Davidson?
Commissioners, also included in the funding for this next year will be a premium, if you will, charged to every department with FTEs based on their FTE count that will be put out with an estimate cost of administrating this program. That shifts the responsibility when someone, like currently, if we have someone that retires or leaves or that has a very high balance, there's a lot of times a big check written out of that department's budget, which is kind of bad for budgeting purposes because it is a one-time expense and doesn't occur every year. And so to make a more uniform budgeting process, accumulated leave will take the burden of those in the future. The flip side of that is that every department will pay into this accumulated leave fund based upon their FTEs. All the details about that will be worked out later when we bring this forward and write a policy regarding this. But for this time, because we're opening the budget and this is basically an additional to the budget, we would just like to create and put this fund in now, the accumulated leave fund, which is very common practice in local governments. In other local governments. So
I was going to mention too that a lot of times when people are at a place for a long time, ultimately they make the most at the very end. And so when we cash out, typically when we've cashed out in the past, they're at their highest rate of pay when they're cashing out. Well, if we're allowing for cash outs during the term of their employment, you're potentially paying out at a lower dollar amount, so potentially saving the county money because you're paying at a lower rate versus a higher rate when they retire.
Okay. Is there any other?
So today's action merely is creating the fund account and the policies on how the sale of leave, how much a person could sell, when they could sell it, how it would be funded. All those things are separate from today's action and would be addressed in the policy. Is that right?
Correct.
Yeah, okay. Because just briefly on the question of the policy on how we fund it, I think we also need to be open to the prospect of it being funded directly by the county as opposed to essentially taxing the departments based on their FTEs Just because you have twice as many FTEs as another department doesn't mean that you're going to use it twice as much. And I would argue that it really ought to be funded directly by the county as a liability for the county as a whole. But that's for the policy for later. You mentioned admin refund levy, and I don't recall much about that. Would you explain that? I think I heard you say that's how it would be funded.
Dwayne, you probably have the better lingo.
Well, it's just one of the possibilities that we've been exploring. The reason we haven't heard about that is because we traditionally have not done one in this county, except this year we did one related to Fire 3. And what this is recouping because of things like tax adjudications, also senior exemptions is the biggest one, but you can also have things that have been litigated regarding property tax refund through the courts or through the Board of Tax Appeals. You have the ability to recoup some of that cost in the current year. Of course, it's all made right in the second, when they re-levy, when they roll out the next year. But in that current year, you're allowed to make the districts whole by this administrative refund levy concept. Because of the size of the increase in the amount that is allowed from 46,000, is it? 44,000 is 61,000 for people to be qualify for a senior exemption that the legislature passed this year. We anticipate a very big influx of people getting senior exemptions in Franklin County. That's going to have a pretty big budget impact. And so the administrative refund levy, if is optional for taxing jurisdictions, including the county, to do one. It's been discussed that this would be a possible, because it's kind of new money to the county, that we could possibly use this to help get this, the county's portion in getting this fund started. By the way, for a point of information, John has informed me that because of the amount of senior exemptions that are now being processed, other jurisdictions have already let him know that they will be doing an administrative refund levy this next year. So this is going to be pretty widespread. I think he's already heard from Pasco School District and from the city of Pasco. So it's going to be it's going to be here.
Okay. Is there any other discussion?
Do we have limits on the amount of accrued leave that county employees are allowed to amass?
I believe that it depends on the bargaining group, because there's some 7.5-hour employees and some 8-hour employees. But I believe for 8-hour employees, I think it's capped out at 910. So any above 910 gets lost at the end of the year currently.
Okay. Do we have annual carryover amount limits? You can accrue so much in a year and you can only carry over so much from year to year, or is that subject to the same limitation?
No, that's what I was referring to,
Okay.
You can only, the amount that you can cash out when you leave employment is less than that. I believe it's 510 for an 8-hour employee, but the amount that you can carry over from each year is higher than that. I believe it's 810 that you can carry and 510 that you can cash out for an 8-hour employee.
Whether it's 500, 900, that's somewhere in the, 4.5 to 8 or 9 months of leave. That's a pretty big liability for the county on exit. At some point in the future, we might want to think about encouraging our employees to make use of some of this vacation time, both for their own physical and mental health, and also to mitigate some of that exit liability for the county. I know there are a number of organizations that will allow a carryover every year of maybe 2 months' worth, and I fully recognize that with respect to our non-bargs and our bargs and our unions, that all of this would have to be discussed discussed and negotiated, but, we're making an effort here in creating an account to try and blunt the cost of these large payouts when people sell back leave. And the fact that they can do it mid-year, that they can cash it out for cash. We just might want to consider those things in the policy.
I think, encouraging people to take leave is a good thing. And there has been discussion as far as the policy to even after, say you cashed out a week, that you would still have to maintain, say, 200 hours after cash out to be able to do it. But I do think your point about encouraging leave usage is good as well. That's even a fraud preventive technique as well, in the financial world at least, because you sometimes don't notice something until someone is gone for a week or two. So by forcing or encouraging people to be gone for blocks of time, you can potentially prevent those things happening.
Yeah. And with somebody leaving and us having to cash out nearly a half a year salary, it can be a pretty big hit to a budget for a department. Thanks.
Any other discussion?
No.
Hearing none. Again, is there any public that is out there that would like to speak on behalf of this?
Commissioners, let me clarify just a little bit on a couple of things. The workload certainly will increase with the exemptions for the assessor's office, but the administrative refund work itself, as far as the refund, that will fall on the treasurer's office. It will be an additional workload on them. But I can tell you from the taxing districts that have contacted me, many of them intend to request that going forward. And I believe only one has in the past. So it certainly is recouping the lost tax revenue dollars that they would have gotten, and how they choose to use it for the individual tax districts is up to those individual, taxing districts on how they choose to do it. But I'm in huge support of this. Our department last year got 2 individuals that retired. Both of them had nearly 6 months of pay coming, and all of that had to come out of my budget, which did not have additional budget funds to deal with that, and we had to absorb it across the board. So now the other issue is not making, but encouraging people to take the time, and we certainly encourage it strongly in our office that people take good vacations and get a rest in their mind. The other struggle of that is then providing the services while they're gone, because they're senior individuals with lots of training, lots of knowledge, and that then their workload falls on everybody else, and that is extremely difficult for all the departments to pick that up as well. So I just want to throw that out so you're at least considering those as well.
Anybody else from the public?
George Dockstetter, Self Landing Road. I agree with what you're trying to do here, but when the policy's set, I think the commissioners ought to look at a tight limit on how much vacation time they can cash out at the end of their term of employment. 6 months is a hell of a long time for somebody to sit there, and if they only work for 4 or 5 years, that means they're not taking any vacation time at all. They need time away from the job to de-stress or whatever and get it off their mind. I'd like to see a lot tighter limits placed on the amounts they can take when they leave.
And Tim, I think you did say that is reduced to $550, was it?
$510, I think, for an 8-hour employee that they can cash out when they
If they have
leave.
and they can accumulate, what's the total they can accumulate?
It's either 810 or 910 hours, I believe.
Yeah, I believe I heard you said 910, so we are reducing that to cash out. Is there any other public comment? Nobody on the phone? All right, with no further discussion, I'll close the public hearing for the vehicle pool and for the accumulated leave and entertain a motion, starting with the vehicle pool, 515.
Move for approval of Resolution 2023-144.
Second.
There's been a motion and a second for Franklin County Vehicle Pool Internal Service Fund, 515, Resolution 2023-144. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Move down to the cumulative leave, Resolution 2023-146.
Move for approval of Resolution 2023-146, creation of a cumulative leave fund.
Second.
There's been a motion and a second for 2023-146, the creation of the cumulative leave fund. Is there any further discussion?
I believe I heard the chair, just prior to closing the hearing, say to Mr. Anderson that this action is reducing the amount, or would reduce the amount that a person could sell back. And I don't suppose that's what the chair intended to say. That's part of the policy to be addressed later, correct?
I think what Commissioner Didier was referring to is that you can only cash out less than what you carry, I mean, your ability to carry from year to year is higher than what you can cash out.
Yeah, I think, and certainly he can speak to it, but I think he said we are reducing the amount that can be sold back, and nothing in this action does that, to my
Correct.
knowledge.
There's no change to
Right.
anything
Okay.
currently.
All right. I just wanted to be
It's
sure.
what's in the bargaining and personnel policy.
Which is precisely why I took the time to ask the question, because I don't want the bargaining units to say, how does this reduce it?
You're correct.
All right,
Yes.
thank you.
Mr. Davidson.
Just for clarification, did I hear a resolution number changing in this?
The resolution number has not changed. However, the fund number 520 has been corrected in the new paper.
So my question is, should
Oh,
that be
there's not a
reflected in-
resolution
So
146?
should the mention of that be in the motion?
It is resolution 146.
We have two different resolutions for the two different funds.
And they can say they want to correct, the number has been corrected.
The only
for
change is the
520.
fund number, correct?
Yeah. The fund number is 520.
Okay.
And thank you for the clarification on what I was trying to state there, that what they can cash out. And so with that, it is Resolution 2023-146, and we have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Moves us down to close record,
Thank you.
public hearing, conditional use permit 2023-02 renewable gas, natural gas production facility. Mr. Bratton.
Thank you.
And at this time, I will open the closed record hearing.
I'm sorry? Yes, I will be. Thank you. Just got to make sure I'm doing these in order, so. Thank you again. Yes, this is a request for a conditional use permit regarding there's different terms that we generally refer to them as biogas facility or methane capture facility to convert it into natural gas at the DeRuyter Dairy off of PK. Address is 2300 Cruise Road. The project comprises parcels numbers 110-410-065, 110-410-047, and 110-320-037.
The zoning on the property is agricultural production 20, comp plan designation is agricultural, and the entirety of the site is 698.82 acres, but the actual area under where they're going to be doing this work is actually closer to 15 acres. So, as mentioned, so south of Cruise Road, west of Juniper Dunes, east of Frontier Road, and north of Keps. As mentioned, it's approximately 15 acres of the eastern part of parcel 110410065. So the entirety of those multiple parcels represent the facility, the dairy facility, and all the ancillary uses or needs to accommodate that dairy. The site plan submitted location of showed the location of 3 digesters, an additional future digester should there be a need to install that at a later date. Process control building, pipe rack, ASB tanks, digestate tank, area for office, bathroom, and then a pool, that should be barn, for parts and maintenance. And this is the properties. So they're looking to locate the actual production facility right here as part of this, but this is the entirety of the route or property associated with this facility.
Derek, if you look at the bottom center of that drawing inside the red box, you see that vertical dark or rectangle?
That right there?
Yeah. I think that was a digester operation there in
The heck happened there?
2006 or so. Do you recall?
I don't.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I'm
That's DeRuyter,
right
right?
now. Yes,
Yeah.
right now my guess is that's being used as a retention pond for their.
Yeah, it was at the time. There was a local organization that worked with them to put a digester there, and they were successful in pulling some
Okay.
methane and.
Yeah, I think this is going to be a bigger facility because they're going to be using that approximately 15 acres. But yeah, we're going to, I believe, be seeing more and more of these as the technology advances, the cost comes down, and the efficiency of the systems improves, assuming we can continue using natural gas. So, but that's another discussion. So on or about March 8th, 2023, staff sent notices to technical agencies, property owners within 1 mile, and posted the action in the Franklin County Graphic. Also posted a pending land use action sign on the property. We issued a SEPA optional determination of non-significance, and it's filed under SEPA Registry 202-2301-023. I can't recall if I've explained the optional SEPA determination process. The way that works is you can either do things in advance, get all your comments, move that forward, or you can set it up to where, recognizing that maybe some things might be missed prior to the hearing, you can finalize your SEPA following the public hearing, just in case other information or something comes out that may have affected your SEPA determination. So that's kind of, so you'll be seeing some of those more. We didn't really use them before, but I think it's on certain projects, it's a better approach because it gives the opportunity for the public to really speak before you finalize your actual, in case something was missed in the analysis. So that's why you're starting to see those ODNSs. Agent comments, approach permit will be required if they got to cut across, or that will be either they'll go out there and look and say, yeah, what you've got's adequate, or no, you're going to have to put in a different approach. That's going to be determined at the time of build. And then any utility extension crossing Franklin County roads will be addressed at the time of application for that process. It is in the proposed use in the AP20 zone and is in accordance with the goals, policies of county development regulations. and the comp plan. I can read through these, but I've got a few more things to get to, so please feel free to ask questions, but otherwise I'm going to move relatively fast through these. The proposal will not adversely affect public infrastructure. It will be constructed, maintained, and operated to be in harmony with the existing or intended character of the general city. In fact, it may even assist with odor mitigation. It will not discourage the development of permitted uses on property in the general vicinity. It's a agricultural-based activity located in a generally either open space, rangeland, or agricultural zone uses. And it will not be more objectionable, as mentioned. It's more likely to actually reduce the potentiality of odor. And it will not endanger the public health, safety, or general welfare if located where proposed. And in addition to the standard CUP language, best management practices will be utilized to minimize dust, and inadvertent protocols are proposed for any archaeological due to the fact the site has been actively worked and utilized for quite a while. They'll have to get a building permit for any of the fencing and structures, and they'll, of course, have to comply with any other local. There's a lot of other agencies involved outside of us that will regulate and confirm whether or not the practices on the facility meet their requirements before they're issued a license and ability to operate. And it'll have to comply with the Public Works comments. And I have a suggested motion, but happy to answer any questions.
Questions, commissioners?
At the very beginning, you referenced the PK Highway?
Yeah, I thought that, but I'm wrong.
Okay, because yeah,
I get a little confused out in that
it's,
area. I apologize.
north of that, so.
Yeah,
All right, no.
significantly north of that.
Thank you.
So Derek, one of the things about these projects is worth noting, and I don't want to speak too much because this is a closed record hearing, but within the scope of the record, I didn't see anything about distributed generation and the benefits of that. Did Ecology or anybody comment on that in the record? By distributed generation, I mean when an operation like this uses, in this case, methane is what they'd be producing. You put natural gas, but that's almost entirely methane.
Right,
And they pull it off of the digester and they run it in a turbine to make electricity. And so you're producing electricity on site. That's distributed generation instead of hooking up to a local power line. Did Ecology or anybody speak to that? I'm asking because it's one of the benefits of this kind of an activity.
Yeah, this one, and I do apologize because normally, so I've seen that, but most of what we've been seeing is actually connection into the Williams pipeline system where they're actually putting it into the general market. Unfortunately, I'm not sure exactly because usually they speak to transmission lines when that's occurring, but I don't recall seeing that in the application.
Nothing in
So
the record about where the gas goes?
Not that I can recall. I apologize.
No,
for
it's
that.
fine. It's, unless you were acquainted with these things in some way, it probably wouldn't occur to you, but, yeah, I don't think it changes my perspective on the project, but when you find out, maybe you could let me know.
I will.
Thanks.
Because I know the one for the, well, never mind. Close record.
Right.
Is there any other discussion? Hearing none, at this time, I'll close the closed record hearing.
Mr. Chairman, move for approval of Resolution 2023-145 as presented in the matter of the conditional use permit for natural gas facility under permit 2023-02.
Second.
Been a motion and a second for Resolution 2023-145. Hearing no further discussion, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Moves us down to H, Ordinance 02-2023, closed record hearing, zone change 64.83 acres, AP20 to RC1. And this is Mr. Bratton again. At this time, I'll open the closed record hearing. Mr. Bratton.
Thank you, Chair.
Mr. Chairman, before you proceed, I think on this one, it might be appropriate if we poll the board as to whether or not there's any potential or more likely perceived conflicts of interest on this matter. I have none.
I believe if there would have been any, they would have been announced. So proceed, Mr. Bratton.
Mr. Bratton, before you proceed, I'm curious whether or not the applicant is the sibling brother of a board member. If I'm mistaken about that, I apologize. But if that's the case, then it's probably, well, let me make it personal. If my sibling had something of this matter before the board, I would recuse myself. But since I'm not hearing any such action, I'm going to assume that no such conflict exists, and we can proceed. Thank you.
I'm actually looking at the parcels to see if it has any conflict with me.
Well, respectfully, the actuality of a conflict, I think, is probably zero. I know you well enough to know that if there was an actual conflict, you wouldn't be here. But I think the statutes also ask us to avoid even the appearance of a conflict. And given that multiple developers operate in that area, I would not want someone to misinterpret your ethics and integrity.
Derek, I'm not familiar with Fraser Road. Where is that located?
It's the extension of Dent Road. It's other roads in that area are John Mullen Drive, or John Mullen Trail, I think. It is owned by Randy Mullen, is the owner of the property.
I see that, yes, that is my brother, so I will recuse myself. I was unaware of it at the beginning of the meeting, but I do see it now.
Yeah, because I believe it's listed under an LLC. It's Desert, or no, that's a different one. Never mind.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate
It is owned by.
your position, Commissioner Mullen, and just to be clear, I wasn't suggesting in any way that you would have an actual conflict, and I appreciate your stepping up to the higher state standard of avoiding even the appearance. And of course, recusal, which is different than abstaining, asks you to leave the meeting room while the discussion is happening. So I thank you for your recusal. I think it's entirely appropriate.
I've read through this before. I don't know if the commissioner actually has to leave the room. He has to, if he recuses himself, he doesn't engage in discussion and basically is just a member of the audience. So let's proceed. Go ahead, Mr. Bratton.
This property, or this proposal, involves three properties. Parcel number 124-300-478, 124-300-120, and 124-300-121. Properties are located south and east of South Landing Road, west of Richview Drive, and north of Fanning Road. Rural shoreline development, and I do apologize, the extension of Dent is Fraser Road, not Fanning Road. But this is still in that same general vicinity. Comp plan is rural shoreline development. The current combined property size of the parcels is approximately 64.83 acres. Current zoning is AP 20, and the request is to change the zoning from AP 20 to Rural Community 1, or RC1. Here are the properties. This area here. Oh, this one doesn't show it. The reality is that if you were to, well, there it is right there. These right here have actually become, they're kind of scrubbed in roads, but there's actually a loop system at the time, but right now it's still just one, or those 3 parcels. But they've done some, that's what those easement lines represent, are actual county roads to be built. There's the zoning, AP 20 currently, AP 20 to the west, and that is also the dividing line from the shoreline development Lammerd to the AP 20 agricultural zone property. So to the east, to the west of this line is shoreline development, comprehensive plan designation. On this side, it's agriculture. Part of the delay in bringing this was that the applicant had to do some work to get the properties broke up appropriately so we didn't create split zones or split designations. So that's all been done through short plats and various other mechanisms to get the property set to where it does qualify. The current zoning, as mentioned, is AP 20. The properties are surrounded by land zone RC5 to the north, RC1 to the west and south, and AP 20 to the east. Minimum lot size for the current zoning district is 20 acres with limited exceptions, basically through an innovative short plat process. While the minimum lot size for the proposed zoning district is 1 acre. Proposed rezone is consistent with the comprehensive plan designation of rural shoreline development, and it will allow for a more intensive use of the land upon any future subdivision or short platting. It is in accordance with the goals and policies of the comprehensive plan. It's rural shoreline. Standard zoning in there is an RC, either 1 or 5. Generally, it's RC1. It is, the comp plan is, the intention based on the comp plan is that area develop into residential uses. So it does match with that concept, and as I've just mentioned. So the effect of the proposal will not be material detrimental. The rezone is a rezone. Whether it develops or changes is addressed through another process at the time of subdivision. That will also go through a full-blown review as well with SEPAs and everything else. So at this point, it's the rezone itself will not do any immediate thing. However, at the time of development, it may be determined there are impacts, but those would be addressed at that time specific to the proposal. Fraser Road will eventually be extended at the time of development, along with requirement of mitigation fees. But again, that would be addressed at the time of actual development of the property. There is merit and value. Again, it's implementing the comprehensive plan, and it will, with that extension of Fraser Road, as it works its way out, it creates another north-south connection. Right now, really all we've got is drive very convoluted routes through residential neighborhoods or Columbia River Road. And this area is developing pretty consistently, shall we say. There are conditions required to be imposed, as mentioned, but that would occur at the time of development. And we do not believe that a concomitant agreement between the county and the petitioner is required for this application. Suggested conditions of approval: future development at the site shall comply with county development regulations. Future development at this site shall comply with local, state, and federal agency standards, and the cultural resource survey may be required prior to issuance of any building permit requiring ground disturbance. That would generally come out at the time of subdivision. Roads and access, any new lots may be created as a result will require access to a county road. Any mitigation fees will be determined upon development. And a full width roadway is to be constructed current county standards for Fraser Road at the time of development. It would not occur at this time as far as as a rezone. Rezones are basically non-project actions, so. And I do have a recommended motion, and I am also quite open to questions.
Questions, commissioners? Commissioner?
Derek, everything about this directly, indirectly complies with our shoreline plan, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it looks like a natural fit. I have no questions or concerns and would move for approval of.
Commissioner Peck, I need to close the closed record hearing, and at this time, if there's no more comments, I do have one question. Fraser Road? How many lane will it be? Is it one north, one south?
As far as I know, that would probably be it, but I believe the right-of-way is established for up to 4 lanes,
Yeah, that would be good. That was my only concern. Okay, with that, at this point in time, I will close the closed record hearing and entertain a motion.
Move for approval of ordinance 02-2023 as presented in the matter of zone change for 64.83 acres from AP 20 to RC 1.
There's been a second. There's been a motion and a second for ordinance 02-2023. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, Mr. Bratton. That moves us down to a public hearing, 2023 initial comprehensive plan. Mr. Bratton, at this time, I'll open the public hearing.
Yes, this is a, so every year, well, not every year, well, every year we have the option of whether or not we want to open up our comprehensive plan for amendments from the public. Because we adopted it, we opened it up in 2022, realizing that, you know, when you do a big, full-blown comp plan, you may have missed something or whatever reason. So we opened it up. Then we got challenged, and then we ran into some issues with regard to exactly the status of our comprehensive plan at this point. However, they had, so fast forward to today, we're bringing this docket before you to discuss 2 applications. Those were the only ones that we received from the public. The process is we establish a docket that's done by the board. Then items that make it onto the docket are moved forward through the standard comprehensive plan amendment process. Items that are not, do not make the cut, I guess, or the board decides not to include on the docket, well, then those require findings of fact, basically articulating why they were not included in the docket. And then, but if they do make it to the docket, then no further action by the board is required at this time. Those items will be brought back, go through the full-blown CPA process. It's kind of a check to make sure that the county or the commissioners desire or see, you know, they want us to invest that time and energy on those projects as well. I'm going to go through a brief presentation. The information and analysis was included in your packets, and we'll also, this is not an item that requires a public hearing. It can be done, you know, just me coming to you, and however, due to the nature of these types of things, I felt it was appropriate that the applicants also have an opportunity to speak if our presentation is not what they desire, or if they want to present any clarification. So, first one is CPA 2022-01, and it's a request to change comprehensive land use designation of approximately 162.3 acres of land from agricultural to rural residential. It is bounded by the city of Pasco to the west and south. Currently, the properties are active crop circles, but the city has moved up to around this area. The Clark's addition. Oh, thank you. Oh, yeah. I'm looking at the slide here. I never bothered to look up. Yes. I apologize. Getting ahead of myself. Do I need to go out and come back in? What happens here? All right. Sorry about that. So, yeah, the property is bounded by the city of Pasco, Clark's Addition, Lambert to the east, and active crop circles to the north. The properties to the north are agricultural with zoned AP 20, to the west and south with the city of Pasco low-density residential land use designation, and with a rural residential land use designation, also sometimes called rural remote, zoned RR1 to the east. I'm sorry, it's rural remote designation with a RR, rural residential zoning to the east, otherwise known as Clark's Addition. So here's a kind of a land use designation map. So this is the property, this is the city, this is Clark's Addition, and then this is all AP 20 and agricultural zone land. Then this is a, where an actual aerial, there's the site. This is the city, all down here. That's all the city. This is agricultural, and then that's Clark's Addition.
So Derek, the site is the red box?
Correct, sorry, yeah.
And where is, I guess the airport's just out of the bottom right corner of the image?
Correct. This is this represents the runway.
Yeah, airport
Clear
exclusion zone,
zoned or
right?
exclusion zone, right. So it's about right here. So the other thing is each of these are acted on individually. So I do have slides for the next one. However, before we get to that, these should each be addressed individually as to whether the board desires to include them or exclude them from the docket.
And to be clear, this is a hearing to gather information and opinions. Are you looking for action from the board today?
We will be looking for action with regard to the inclusion of the docket. However, that is also, because this is legislative, at the will of the board. If you'd like me to go back, do something else, present you with additional information or anything along those lines, that is totally under your purview.
You're looking for action today on the inclusion or exclusion of each of the items you're briefing?
Correct.
Okay, then that prompts me to ask, what has been the coordination on these? Just applicant in your office?
Correct, and then staff reviewed the regulations, state, local laws, plans, various other things against the proposal, what we can and cannot do.
And then if we were to agree to include these in the docket, which is simply a list of things that would be considered for possible changes to the comp plan, that would be the appropriate time and place for other local agencies to coordinate?
Correct. That's why if it's included, there's no need for the board to do anything other than say, yeah, it's included, because it'll go through that full-blown process. If it's denied, that's why the board needs to produce findings of fact to explain, because
Yeah.
you got to be able to explain why.
I'm actually pretty familiar with the process. I just was trying to lay it out there for the public.
Yeah.
So today, the action is yes, we're willing to consider it, no, we're not. And if it is being considered, then other agencies, in this case, perhaps the Port of Pasco, which is responsible for the airport, would have their opportunity to weigh into the discussion if they had a concern. I don't know that they would or not.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
So you're looking for us to approve this right now?
That's my ask, yes,
Well,
but yeah.
It is a public, open
Well,
public
right,
meeting.
and that's, yep.
So is there anybody from the public that would like to speak about this?
I guess what, a better way of what I was trying to say is that, yes. At the end of this process.
Right.
I would like you guys to make the decision. I apologize.
George Dockstetter, I'm here representing Fred Oberding, the owner of the property. This is the piece that we tried to get included in the comp plan, and now he's hung out there to dry on being able to farm the property. He's going to end up with houses to the south, Pasco High School, at least the high school to the southwest, and houses to the west, and Clark Addition to the east, along with the school is looking to add 2 more schools in that area. And with him being isolated like that, his farming ability is going to be severely limited to the crops he can grow and the wastewater that he's been putting on there for odors and whatnot. And he's just being pinched out, and we're asking again. We made the application over a year ago. We were the first ones in last January. As soon as came available, this be included on the docket to have the zone change. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Good morning, Commissioners. Thank you for this opportunity. I have no personal interest in this property. I do know the applicant. And as perspective, as a developer in Pasco, it was really unfortunate that this was not included in the comp plan. And is really unfortunate because it has tied his hands to be able to farm effectively. It is, there's a lot of high-value crops that he will not be, able to do it. You could farm hay there, but I wouldn't be the one that would want to be baling at 2 a.m. whenever the neighbors on 3 sides started to call. So would encourage you to pass this, do it as quickly as you can to allow him to develop as well as he is able, being excluded from the comp plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Morning, Commissioners. Peter Harpster, Octaria Engineering, here also representing applicant Mr. Fred Oberding and the other applicant, Mr. Levi Underwood. We'll get to his presentation in a bit. We're a little surprised to be here today. This was supposed to be a public hearing, and that is one of the requirements of the comprehensive plan amendment process is to have at least one public hearing. The process for the amendment is outlined in both Chapter 14 and 17 of the Franklin County Code. Franklin County is actually a rare jurisdiction in the state that goes straight to the Board of Commissioners for inclusion in the docket instead of going to the Planning Commission first. And so that's another weird anomaly where the Planning Commission hasn't had an opportunity to review these. And so then other agencies like the Port of Pasco, the City of Pasco, or the school district also hasn't had a chance. In fact, this is the very first opportunity for the public to comment on these applications, and like I mentioned, they weren't even properly noticed. 10 days, Chapter 14, 70060 states that 10 days prior to a public hearing, planning director shall ensure that the following notice requirements are completed by the Plan and Building Department. I won't read them both, but notifying through a newspaper and then mailing notices to neighbors within a 1 mile radius. Neither of those happened. And we didn't even get 10 days notice ourselves as the applicant. We got notice 7 days ago, which included 2 weekend days. Mr. Olberding and Mr. Dockstetter had no idea. And Chapter 147080 also states that an initial review by the board, like we're doing today, must be held as part of a public hearing. But I don't think we can call this a public hearing because it wasn't properly noticed. And so I could keep going, but it's kind of pointless. Get RCWs and WACs that speak to early and continuous public participation in the amendment of comprehensive plans. And so today, instead of arguing the merits of the applications, and staff did recommend denial of including them in the docket, we'd simply ask for the board to either send it back to planning to be properly noticed or send it to the planning commission with the recommendation of approval for inclusion in the docket, because that's simply all it would be, is being included in the docket for further review, and then would give the public more opportunity to participate in the process. I think that's all I got. Thank you.
Well, thank you. So hearing that, I believe we need to, Derek, I think we need to take this back and give proper notice.
Respectfully, I don't know that that's actually accurate, what was reported. This is the docket phase. What he was describing sounded more to me like the actual CPA process. The docket is up to you guys. You guys can complete it, but just respectfully, I don't think that was quite accurately represented as to actually what our process and policies were. That said, as I've mentioned, more than happy to take back whatever you guys want me to do with it, but I don't think that was exactly.
What's the will of the board?
I get your point, Derek. You did introduce it and put it on the agenda as a hearing, and anytime there's a public hearing, there is a notice requirement. And I'm curious, did we?
I'd have to go back and check, but I believe we noticed this back in April 29th, but I have to double check. So that said, I don't want people making decisions that they're uncomfortable making. So if, again, I'm more than happy to do whatever the board wants, but this item is actually at the will of the board. The board doesn't even have to allow for amendments. And I don't have to have a public hearing in order to do that.
Well, we have it on the agenda as a public hearing, and I think that's what the concerns were brought out about proper notice for a public hearing, and I don't believe we have that.
Well, that's what I'm checking is. Which one am I looking at? Oh, that's the wrong one.
Derek, while you were looking, is that notice done directly out of your office or through the commissioner's office?
It's done through my office.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't seem to have on me. I wasn't expecting this line, so, no, like I said, no problems, but I do believe we noticed this back in March or April. I just have to double check. And then it was posted last Thursday in the Franklin County Graphic. So, and we also sent out notice to everybody on our Notify Me list regarding this action. So, again, don't have a problem taking it back, but I do want to clarify the record that I do believe we did meet the noticing requirements. So,
Well, the potential harm, if we perhaps didn't, is that we disadvantage and disenfranchise and perhaps don't follow the rules. The harm, if we decide not to proceed and just bring this back next week, is that we'll have to advertise again in the Graphic and notice again because the date and time will change. So when I compare the two potential harms, I think we probably have to just say, well, you probably did it right, but let's let's go through the process and the expense and do it again for next week. And that way we avoid the risk of disenfranchising somebody. Seem fair?
Yeah, and based on that, any need to go forward on the next one? Do you want to hear about the next one? Or do you just want me to do it all in that event?
I think it's best to give them all equal treatment so that there's no perception of disparate treatment between packages.
So I should proceed with 2, since we just did 1.
Well, you make a fine point, but no, I don't think we should. I
Okay.
think we should just do them all next week.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. I appreciate it, and we'll.
But that's
we'll
just
bring
me.
it back.
I mean, I don't know what anybody
Okay.
else thinks.
One issue is that there's no way for me to notice for next week because Thursday, well, I'll see what I can do.
Yeah, Derek, I think you need to look at the day notice because I believe it was 2 weeks? 10 days is what I heard, 10 days, so we can't even meet next meeting's criteria.
That's what I'm saying.
We're gonna have to go 2 weeks out.
I'll get it figured out, and I'll bring it back as expeditiously as I can.
And please take notice of the man back there and make sure he gets notification, as Mr. Oberdeen and Mr. Dockstetter, everybody gets notice. 'Cause they're there.
Like I said, they're, pretty sure they're on my notify me list,
Okay.
and we did send that out to everybody.
And Derek, just one other favor. Once you've had a chance to confer with your staff, just send us an email letting us know if we did or didn't meet the requirements for
Okay.
notice.
Yep.
I'd
Yeah,
like you to,
definitely.
I'd like you to have the opportunity to affirm
It's-
that.
Again, there's different pieces, and, you know, it was, never mind. All right, yep. Will do.
So at this time, I will close this public record hearing, and we will continue at a later meeting, depending on time notification. So with that, we'll move down to Commissioner Administrator updates. Mr. Gonzalez?
Thank you, Commissioner, and Commissioners. Wanted to get everybody updated. This weekend, we had the big Cinco de Mayo celebration, and was proud to see the Sheriff's Office participating. Our Sheriff's posse and the deputies were involved in the parade, so I think it's the first time we've participated in many years. So I wanted to thank Sheriff Raymond and I think Under Sheriff Monty Ubers here today. So they were both tremendously helpful, and we're really into it. They had a booth there at the fair and the event portion, so was really proud to see how involved we were, and the posse was helping with security at the event. So they were many in uniform, so it's really great to see Franklin County out there in the community. That's one of my goals, is to really get us involved in the community. So that was great to see. Another big thing that's been in the news media lately, Public Defender's Office, and really an OPD crisis that we've got going on. The Herald had a big article about that Sunday, so we're certainly facing a crisis in this area. There's just simply not enough money to take on cases. There aren't enough lawyers. Actually had an opportunity to speak with the governor on Wednesday. He was in town for the opening of the Police Training Center and also Catholic Charities. So. And he asked if there were issues going on in your jurisdiction, and I said, you know, this is at the top of the list, and really challenged the governor to say, look, you need to help us out. I told him the unfunded mandates are killing us. Right now, we've got to look into using ARPA funds to keep ourselves afloat, probably in the neighborhood of $500,000. So I'm not afraid to say that the system is crumbling. And the governor did seem receptive, and how helpful he'll be, I don't know. But, you know, you talk to our constituents, and sometimes it feels like crime is becoming legal in the state of Washington. So, you know, I think it's time for us to all stand up to this and, you know, keep pushing this into the public eye, because it certainly is something that I know Commissioner Peck has been bringing towards the legislature. So something that we just really need to keep out there. Myself and Dwayne had a chance to meet with Judge Shea Brown, Tiffany Runge, and also Judge Jacqueline Stamm on this issue. So they're well aware of it. Judge Brown is about to start assigning private lawyers to some of these cases. And, you know, those bills can stack up very quickly. And the reason I want to bring this out to the public, because, I mean, it certainly is a crisis, and, you know, it has the potential to really have a fiscal impact on us. So, and again, you know, it's those unfunded mandates that come from the state legislature that really put us in a tough position. So I think it's my duty to really inform the public and let them know that something needs to be done. On a little bit of a lighter note, our Facebook page continues to grow. We're at about 1,000 followers right now. We're about 220 on Instagram. So I always get a little giddy, you know, to see those platforms grow. It gives us a reach to the public, and people are really enjoying our Facebook page. We're getting a lot of likes, and right now we've got a link to this meeting on there. So I think, again, that's a transparency piece. One thing I'm doing internally, I just established a strategic growth committee within the county. This is a combination of elected officials and staff members, you know, to really look at the strategic long-term growth of the county and to start doing some of those things. Yesterday, we had our second .09 fund meeting. This is the sales and tax used for public facilities in rural counties. This fund is very robust. We've got about $6 million in there. One thought was to actually float a bond so we can have multiple projects that get funded, and that debt service would actually be paid for out of those .09 funds. So that discussion continues at the table where the City of Pasco, Connell, the Port of Pasco, Stephen McFadden is really shepherding this. He's just done an incredible job, and Stephen's a great partner in the process. You know, only other thing I wanted to mention, we had a chance to meet Commissioner Didier and I with Commissioner Amanda McKinney on Friday from Yakima County. I mean, she's a real sharp cookie and a leader in many facets across the state. So it was fun to get to know her and meet her, and you know, hopefully partner on some issues. She's going to connect me with some of their staff, so, you know, as I can continue to learn the process. But really grateful to Commissioner Didier for that introduction.
Absolutely. Mr. Davidson, our consultant, anything to add?
No, I just wanted to make comment that I've been attending meetings with Mike upon his request, like he alluded to in the past week. I am reducing, as you commissioners know, I'm reducing my hours considerably to lessen the cost to the county, but still partake in what meetings Mike has requested that I attend with him, and some projects that I'm finishing up for him. I just want to make comment about just how impressed I am about the progress of our new county administrator, that he just is, the transparency that you bring into the government, to this local government, and coordination with all the department heads is something that I find very, very, brings delight to me of how well he's doing. And so that makes me feel good that I'm becoming more and more involved with the nonprofits that I'm involved with. And yesterday I spent the day over on the west side involved in some of those. And so I'm very delighted about how things are going. So I just end my comments there.
Thank you. Thank you for all your help. Mr. Peck.
So this week's calendar was light on meetings, which is a refreshing change from the last 3 months of legislative sessions. Met with a local committee that is working on shoreline access as development continues up the west side of the county. They're concerned about public access to the Corps of Engineers shoreline being closed off, and they have some good energy and some good ideas, and at some point I won't speak for them, but I expect they'll be in speaking with the board about those concerns. Met with a constituent on U.S. Corps of Engineers flowage easements over privately owned shoreline properties. Many of those easements that would allow the Corps to flow water well onto private lands have been extinguished going back, most of them probably in the mid-'70s, but there are still a few remaining, and helping with that process to get those flowage easements extinguished or removed. Reference the unfunded mandates from the state that Mr. Gonzalez spoke to. I appreciate you bringing it up to the governor again. As you can imagine, the 39 counties through the State Association of Counties have been pounding on the unfunded mandate issue for decades, and specifically on OPD and the fact that we believe that that's a state obligation to fund, excuse me, and provide that public defense. So he's well aware of it and regrettably has not taken action over many years now. But I do appreciate you bringing it up because he needs to hear it every chance we get. And on the .09 funds, the legislature did, after many years of being asked, did extend the timeline on those .09 funds out to 2054, which, as I mentioned, I think in last week's meeting, is what opens the door for the committee to look at bonding those dollars and using the .09 funds to pay those bonds. The effect of that is that it lets us spread the wealth a lot more and get money today for badly needed projects. The downside is that those .09 funds for a number of years going forward will be obligated and won't be available. That's exactly what we did with the track, now HAPO Center, is that much of those .09 funds for many years have been encumbered to pay the bonds that pay for those structures. Thank you.
Commissioner Mullen?
So last week we had the Greater Columbia Behavioral Health meeting. Excuse me. Also attended the open house for Lourdes Counseling Center in Richland. They have 16 beds, and they are offering inpatient, outpatient services for mental health and substance abuse. And so I took the tour there and just very excited to see the progress that's taking place on that. And in reference to the unconstitutional payments, there's been a lot of news and talk about that. And I just want to point out that this was voted on in 2016. And what makes it unconstitutional is the fact that it was voted on once they were in office. And you cannot increase your wage once you're in office. So inadvertently, it has affected both myself and Mr. Didier in an overpayment of $340, which was actually paid out to everyone with the insurance in the county to offset the high increases of insurance. The issue happened that the insurance rate went up a month later. So this overpayment of $340 that went to myself and Mr. Didier was never voted on by myself or Mr. Didier. We were just caught up in what was poorly voted on in 2016. I've already made arrangements, like I've said in the past, with Mr. Tim Anderson to have the $340 taken out of my gross wages, because otherwise I would be paying income tax on that. And just to clarify and make it a simple process as possible, I just told Mr. Anderson to pull it out of my gross wages, then I won't have to deal with it at the end of the year. But I've always taken the insurance. I didn't want the cash payment. Like I said, I was inadvertently affected on it by decisions that were made prior to me taking office. And that is the whole unconstitutional basis of it, is because you cannot vote yourself a wage increase once you're in office. And I just want to make it adamantly clear that neither myself or Mr. Didier were involved in that process. So, thank you.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Chairman, that's been brought up a couple of times today, so I'd like to take a point of privilege and just...
Mr. Commissioner Pitt, could I give my updates first, please?
Sure, thank you.
Thank you. So with that, I would had the veterans meeting at which their virtual is not working right. I called the clerk of the board, and she even tried, and I don't know what's going on, but couldn't get in, said I was locked out of the meeting. They already had the meeting going on, so I don't know what transpired there. I'm going to get a hold of them today and find out. Had the agenda meeting, and then, yes, we had the meeting with Commissioner McKinney from from Yakima, and we're talking to her about these unfunded mandates and issues that are affecting both counties and the importance of us working together to try to get OPD. And I have my Eastern Washington Council of Governments that's coming up, and I'm going to also talk to all those county governments about joining together and making a statement against these unconstitutional, mandates that the state's throwing down on local government when they say, well, you have avenues of raising the money, but yeah, only because they tried to propose that we could raise property taxes 3% in 1 year instead of 1%, and that failed. So if we wanted just to hammer on our constituents and get them to pay for all these unfunded mandates, I don't think we could ever succumb to the amount of money it's going to take for what's happening today in the state of Washington, and that is we're not enforcing the rule of law. And getting along to this, that Commissioner Peck wants to talk about, I have reviewed the meeting minutes from those meetings, and I was totally against this, and I have spoken out against the abuse to our benefits package, which I believe has occurred. And I, too, have taken the insurance. And I'd just like to emphasize the fact that Commissioner Mullen and Commissioner I both spoke out against this back in the day. I have the meeting minutes from those meetings, and we were against it. I, too, will meet with Tim today, and I'm going to ask him to take that out of my wages. I want to get it paid back because I have been adamantly against this from the get-go. Benefits are not part of salary, and when you take it part of salary and you vote it in as an increase after you've been elected, you violated your oath. So that's all I have to say. Commissioner Peck.
So, aside from the obvious rush to judgment by self-anointed constitutional experts, I'll just point out that the issue here is whether or not benefits are a taxable fringe benefit, which is what the federal IRS code calls them, or whether they're wages and salary. It is absolutely correct that there's a prohibition on increasing salaries during a term. There's also a prohibition on reducing them. If you've got a judge who isn't acting the way you like, you're prohibited from downscaling their salary to influence those things. So the statute is there, and it's there for good purpose. Each employee in the county gets the same amount of benefit dollars. The manner in which those benefit dollars are expended can vary under law. They can be used to buy insurance. They can be used as tax-free health savings account VEBA dollars, or they can be used and received as taxable fringe benefit dollars. They're not salary and wages, to certainly my understanding or that of my previous fellow commissioners who voted for this. It's important to note that the cost to the county for each of these three options is exactly the same. Whether you take it as buy insurance with it, or take it as VEBA, or take it as a taxable income, it doesn't cost the county any different. Now, if this were in fact salaries and wages, I would ask, why didn't our county auditor, who has raised this issue, pay the appropriate amount to the state's public employees retirement system based on that salary? Because in fact, it appears that they were treated as benefit dollars and not salary. Same probably with labor and industry fees that are paid on employees. It's my view that whether the action in 2016 turns out to have been strictly compliant or not doesn't change the fact that everybody that's involved, one way or another, has the same motivation, which is find out what the truth of the matter is and then take whatever steps are appropriate. If it's determined that no, in fact, it is a taxable fringe benefit, is not a change to wages and salary, then there is no issue. If, on the other hand, it's determined that it's gray, or no, it's determined that it is part of salary, then we need to go back and we need to look at at least for some employees, because, by the way, this change affected all electeds, not just commissioners. We need to go back and look at ensuring that the payments to the retirement accounts were appropriate, because again, these payments were separated out as taxable benefit, not as wages and salary. Regardless of anybody's current notion, my option and my position is the proper thing to do is what I think the auditor should have done, which is when he first became aware of a concern, is taken that to our legal staff and said, please do a thorough legal analysis and come tell us whether, one, it's legal and it's fine, or two, it's not, and here are recommended adjustments or changes. If it turns out that it is considered not to be a taxable fringe benefit, which is what the IRS calls it, but in fact is considered wages, then it is appropriate that it get paid back. And if it's paid back, then we'll address the question of whether or not the county then has a duty to reimburse that amount in VEBA funds, because none of our electeds should be expected to, if it's determined that it wasn't proper, to pay back the taxable portion and forego the VEBA. So in the end, it costs the county and the citizens the same. The only distinction really is that on the taxable side, the recipients paid taxes on it to the federal government, which they may end up absorbing. That's a minor point, but that's the distinction. Then I also wanted to make light and explain that part of the motivation in creating flexibility on how you deliver benefits is to make us a more attractive employer. We're always talking about how we attract and retain quality people. We have employees whose spouses work at Hanford, they work at PNNL, they work in various industries throughout the Tri-Cities, healthcare. In many of those cases, the spouses have great healthcare benefits. They don't want Franklin County's healthcare plan. And the more flexibility and the more options that we can give those potential employees, the more attractive we are as an employer. If you go to some counties, you're required to take their health benefits. If you're an employee who's got great health care through your spouse somewhere else, that's a disincentive to go to that county. So Franklin County's effort was to try and be as flexible and attractive as we can. For some people, having a spouse with health care through, say, PNNL and receiving VEBA dollars here is an excellent match. For others who don't want VEBA because the federal government has and continues to talk about it being a first payer option where they would tap your VEBA dollars before your insurance, excuse me, there are good reasons why people would prefer to pay the taxes on that and take that as a taxable fringe benefit today rather than a tax-free VEBA account that might get tapped by the government later. So each of those three options, again, costs the county, excuse me, and the taxpayers exactly the same. It gives flexibility and makes us more attractive as an employer, which is critical right now. And if it turns out that it's determined that, no, this is not a taxable fringe benefit, but in fact, under our rules, does count as salary and wages, then I want to know why the auditor for all these years has segregated it out and not paid retirement dollars on it, not paid L&I dollars on it, but in fact treated it as a taxable fringe benefit the same way we do with cell phone reimbursements and vehicle costs and other things. So I'm choosing to wait until people who actually went to law school study this and give us an opinion as to which is the correct and lawful path. And of course, as I've always done, I will follow what I believe is the correct and lawful path. For those who have recently insinuated that this is about compensation for myself, I'll remind that you're looking at a 15-year county commissioner who is the lowest paid elected official in Franklin County and have been for years. And that's by choice because I froze my own salary for a term while others didn't. This job is not about reimbursement for me. Certainly the 2016 action was not about enriching myself, as has been alleged. It was about creating flexibility and trying to meet the interests and needs of as many potential employees as we could. So if anybody's got questions beyond that, feel free to give me a call. But I'm going to wait and see what, like I say, the people who actually went to law school have to say, and then I'll follow their guidance. Thank you for the time.
I would like to comment as well on that, because just my opinion, but I don't agree with everything that was just said, because it doesn't affect all the electeds. It only affected the current commissioners, and for that fact, because the current commissioners are the only ones that voted on it. And that's the part that makes it unconstitutional. I definitely think we need to take a look at our insurance. I spoke with Mr. Gonzalez about it, and I know that when you look to our neighboring county, they can cash out their insurance, but at a far reduced amount. It's not the full amount that we get in Franklin County if you chose to do so. I also don't agree that it would cost the county the same amount, because I can't imagine anyone that had a spouse that had better insurance would pay out of their own pocket for the additional insurance from Franklin County. I mean, it just doesn't. Why would you pay for something you don't need? And this was brought up not by it was addressed by the county auditor, but it was actually brought up by the MRSP, which is a group of lawyers that look out for the best interests of the counties. And as far as freezing the payment of salary, once again, you can go back and look the November meetings in 2016 where the sitting commissioners voted to give themselves a raise on election day. The only one that didn't vote was Mr. Miller. His intention was to lower his own wage to meet the current salaries of the other two electeds. So definitely needs to be taken a look at, because I don't think it's sustainable to continue with this insurance payments. Thank you.
And I will just add, it's MRSC, and yes, they are lawyers. They're the ones that sent out the information to be looked at. In particular, a stipend could also be given to an elected official instead of health insurance, but a stipend would be treated as extra compensation income. Given the constitutional prohibition against additional compensation during a term of office, see Article 11, Section 8, the stipend could not be given or accepted until the officer starts and is reelected in a new term. And the way Commissioner Mullen and I got caught up in this is because we voted to increase the health insurance, the benefits for the constituents of the courthouse. And so we voted ourselves an increase. That's what we're paying back. We got caught up in this because we trying to give people more benefits for their insurance policy, and so we got caught up in it because it overlapped. I think it was 2 months there where we had to pay where it didn't take effect. But we have a situation here where it is taxed, so it is income, and it was voted 9 days after the election. They did move the salary increase to the day of the election, and may I add on that I was in that meeting along with Commissioner Mullen, and there wasn't proper notice for that meeting. So that meeting, realistically, was not of standing because it didn't have the proper notification. If people wanted to go back, they could see that. So with that, we'll leave it alone. And I am going to go meet with Tim because, again, I have been very vocal against this, and I'm going to repay my money.
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to add one final note. That is just want everybody to understand that MRSC, Municipal Research Services Corporation, is in fact a group of attorneys. But the piece you don't hear is that they're actually a not-for-profit agency in the state of Washington that writes newsletters and opinions on municipal governments and the rules that apply and don't apply. And they're generally well-regarded, good people and good attorneys who do good work. But they will tell you, and I've spoken with them many times, do not act on our legal advice. We are not your legal authority. Your attorney for your county is your prosecuting attorney's office. They put this in their documents in writing, and they tell you when they speak to you in person. And they do that because you're supposed to act on the legal advice from your legal office, not from them. It may well be that they are spot on correct on this issue. All I'm saying is their article raised the issue, and now our attorneys will look at it, and whatever is deemed to be lawful, that's the way I'll go. Thanks.
With that, we'll move into public comment. Is there anybody for public comment? Anybody on the phone? Go ahead,
Put
Mr.
my 2 bits in again. This is all a crock. If you don't want the benefits that are offered, then don't take them. But you shouldn't get more money. You're getting paid enough damn money to do a job that isn't a 40-hour-a-week job 52 weeks out of the year. And for the department heads, if they don't want the benefits, so what? You don't take cash. I've told you before, my employees, if they don't want the benefit, I'm not writing them an extra check. It's just tough shit.
Well, let me finish what I was saying. Clerk, your clock is awfully fast. So I guess I'm going to have to talk fast. I just want to make clear that I'm not after anybody's head, but I did do some fact-finding and some searching in my reporting. And where we at with this now, and what I find is the little less than $47,000 that Mr. Peck received. Your small checks of $334, I believe they were, to both of you. The other commissioners that received about $20,000 each should all be paid back. Mr. Peck was involved in some unethical situation. What he has done here is unethical, and he should clear it up. The 2 of you have made it clear to the public that you're going to take care of it, and you're going to do the ethical thing, is give the money back and not be involved in this. You weren't involved in it, you didn't vote on it, and you got caught up in something that somebody else did and got yourselves in a situation. Now, Matt Beaton's office, Auditor Matt Beaton's office, has forwarded this information to the Washington State Auditor's office. It will involve the Mr. Ferguson's office, the Attorney General's office, and then they'll come down and put the hammer on where they believe needs to be punished. And I think that they're going to find, and what I have found, that an unethical practice has happened here by voting on something that should have never been voted on. Monies should not be given to those that do not deserve it. And that's what happened here. So to solve the problem and to clear the other 2 commissioners, to clear their names, not only to go with the fact findings that the county auditor's office has found, but also file a complaint on your behalf through your administrator. And I'll tell you, Mr. Davison, with his experience, and Mr. Gonzalez, who knows how to write, would do a very good job in filing a complaint with the Washington State Auditor's Office and the Washington State Attorney General's Office on this unethical practice of a commissioner of being involved with other commissioners and in something that has caused damage to the work that Mr. Gonzalez is trying to do to clean up and put a shining star of the Franklin County. And this little blemish here is causing his work to be overviewed. So I would strongly suggest that you 2 commissioners file this complaint through your administration to go along with the fact findings that the county auditor, Matt Beaton's findings, has sent forward to the Washington State Auditor's Office. This will clear your name. They will let them know that what the position you have done, the positions that you have given the money back, and before they can come down and put the hammer down on anybody that's been involved in this unethical practice, that your names are cleared even before they can even make a decision on either one of you. Again, I like the three of you. Our newspaper, I went back and checked, we have endorsed all three of you at one time or point. My wife and I have endorsed all three of you at one time or point. And so I'm not out to go after anybody's head, but rather protect the Franklin County's image and the work that Mr. Gonzalez is trying to do for you here, and that you clear your names. Thank you and I heard that bell go off. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else for public comment?
John Rose, Pasco, Washington. Just a couple of comments. The first is that I'm sure you're aware of the unmandated open border we have in the south of our country. And I'm sure that's some of the financial things that you're starting to deal with, but I don't believe we've really felt any impact yet, to tell you the truth. For our neighborhood and where we live, some 24 years now, it's just been the recent 2 years, maybe 2.5 years, that we've seen homeless walk up and down our street. And today, I've noticed 3, up just down Road 48, up Sylvester, people that are just looking for someplace to lay down, to live, I guess. I was surprised one morning when I went over to 99. I was there before the doors opened, 99 Auto on Court Street. And down in the front of their store, they have a sunken place to get into the underneath their basement there. And there was someone laying there, sleeping. I asked the owner when I got into the store if she was aware of the fact that this was going on. And, oh yeah, they have actually 2 places around that building that homeless find and just duck in there at night and sleep. I guess just for us, my family, we've taken to the point of locking our gates at night. We've made sure that we literally kind of circle the wagons, if you will. I know you're aware of the fact that catalytic converters are disappearing and finding their way over in Kennewick and different places, et cetera, et cetera. I guess what I'm saying is I don't give my consent to an open border. Regardless of what Secretary Mayorkas says, we have an open border, plain and simple. And I guess I would say that I have the right to say who comes in and out of my house, in and out of my yard. I need to know who's in there and why they're there. And they may need my help, but that's my choice. I think that you all recognize the fact that you are being forced to do something that you don't want to do. I don't know how much power and authority you have to stop it. But you're putting your community, or we are being put into harm's way. And so are those who are actually coming across this border. They also face a great deal of harm and injury and risk. Anyway, and I'm sorry for the gauntlet and for literally the entrapment that appears to be going on with all this stuff prior to you being here. It seems to me that between the district attorney, I heard your bell, Karen, between the district attorney and his problems with reimbursement and just other things that have happened over the last few years, it just appears that no one really has ability to take account of really where the money's coming in and going out and who gets it and how they get it and why they get it. There's no real finite accountability and accounting of monies, and then you find yourselves in trouble. Really? Really? Anyway, thank you for listening.
Thank you. Is there anybody else for public comment?
Good morning again, Commissioners. I wanted to share something with you that I think that will put a smile on your face. I had the opportunity to be a part of giving an award on Saturday night at the Republican Party, had a Republican Action Conference in Kennewick, and I think you each know Korean War veteran and Reverend Fred Nemo. He was recognized as being the oldest serving PCO in the state of Washington at 91 years old. That was pretty special to be able to help give him that award, and he was very surprised and thankful to do that. So if you have the opportunity, I would encourage you to reach out to him and congratulate him on that award, and he still has that Fred Nemo smile. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody on the phone? No callers? Anybody else for public comment? Okay, then we'll move down to elected and department heads. I guess I got those two out of order, but we're going to go to the elected department heads right now.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm Josie Kelzer, Treasurer. I just want to give you an update for the 2023 first half collection that we just finished for the property tax. We finished as of yesterday, May 8th, at 56% of collection, and it's about $6 million. Some change will be going into current expense. Just want to let you know that we have 42,000 plus parcels that we bill and we collect twice a year. And of that 42,000 parcels that we sent out billing to, we collected 39 plus parcels that my office has to either take by phone, by mail, by counter, or online, that we have to post to the parcels. So I just want to give a shout out to my staff for a job well done, and they make it look seamless, even though we have hiccups going through the office at different times, but they do amazing work. So thank you.
Thank you.
Josie, I have a question real quick. And yes, thank you for your staff doing a great job. When you said 56% collection, is that extra 6%, is that for people that paid for the full year?
They pay for a full year, or it could be past years that we have not collected on.
All right. Oh, thank you.
Thank you. Any other department heads, elected officials? Seeing none, Mr. Gonzalez, I'd like to ask a couple things of you. We don't have a code enforcement officer, and I have talked about this at previous meetings. It is up, I believe, to the Public Works, not Public Works, but Building and Planning and
planning.
Building. They're supposed to have a code enforcement officer, but they're not fulfilling that obligation, so.
I don't know if that's necessarily accurate. Derek Bratton fulfills that role, and then some staff will fill in at times. And when I've talked to Derek about it, it's kind of on a complaint basis. I think what we've talked about is sometimes when you have a code enforcement officer, you do run the risk of it seems like it's overreaching at times, like they're looking for things. So it's certainly a balancing act. You know, when I was at the city of Pasco, we had a robust code enforcement office, and they were actively searching for things. But I think within city limits, you have a tendency to have more issues, weeds, garbage, certainly homeless, needles, and things of that nature. And so I think it's more of a necessity, whether, and I know there's some issues going on in the county that we could probably talk about offline, but I do know Derek is fulfilling that role. So I don't want to give the perception that nothing is happening, but it could be beneficial.
Let me ask you this, and if I have some people that have a gripe or a problem, should I have them get a hold of you, or get a hold of Derek, or get a hold of both?
I always say constituents should have reach to anybody within the courthouse, from a transparency standpoint. I do believe in the chain of command. Okay. Certainly, if they choose to reach out to me, I would like for them to also reach out to Derek.
Yes.
Because I don't want to micromanage anybody. I'm not a micromanager. Derek has been nothing but professional during my time and working with him. So, and whatever issues we have, we'll work it out. And, as I've always said, I'm willing to talk with any constituent on an issue, and I'm almost certain Derek will as well. So however they want to, they could call me, they can call Derek, they can reach out to both of us.
All right, I will talk to them and find out if they have, which I'm almost positive they have already reached out to Derek. But then I'll have them, if they have, I'll have them reach out to you. The second thing I would like to ask you about is Everett has passed an ordinance for our law enforcement against the open drug use. And as counties, I think we need to take the lead in this since our state isn't, and we got to start putting an ordinance together to where we adamantly are against open drug use in our county. Have you seen the ordinance that
I have
Everett has put
not,
together?
but I would like to let you know that we've been working with the city of Pasco a little bit to open this conversation on crafting an ordinance that we work jointly together on. So I know that Sheriff Raymond has been actively talking with Chief Roski about this, working with their legal team. So, I mean, this has to do with the Blake decision, and I can tell you it's been really frustrating. During my time as an economic development manager, I can't tell you how many businesses would reach out to us, in particular in Peanuts Park right there in the new $6 million facility, open drug use, people shooting up, smoking meth. It was pretty disturbing, and there was literally nothing the businesses could do about it, nor could law enforcement. So I do believe that we as cities and counties need to take things into our own hands. In particular, if our legislature is not going to do anything, I know they have a special session coming up to talk about it, but I think I'm always one to go on the offensive. I mean, it's our community. I mean, I know Commissioner Ditter, you always say you got to start in your front yard and clean it up.
Well,
And,
that's your
what we got to do.
backyard.
Yep. Or your backyard, your front yard.
Clean up your own backyard before you
Absolutely.
try to clean up. But
I think so.
This is where it'll be a deterrent from people wanting to come and reside in our county. If we have an ordinance put together that we're enforcing, then it'll be a deterrent.
I think so, and I know Wasac has been actively involved in the process, and I mean, it would be nice if the legislature could collectively come together and enforce the law like it should. But again, if they're not able to come up with something that actually helps cities and counties, in my opinion, I think we do have to take action in our own hands.
And again, great job. I mean, you're doing a fantastic job. Your report, I'm reading it every week.
Thank you.
And what's taking place next week. Great job being open and transparent and letting the public know what's going on. Thank you.
Absolutely, and to let the public know, I give each commissioner every Sunday night equal information. So again, I want equal information for each of our commissioners, and everybody's always welcome to reach out to me. In terms of commissioners, and that's what it's all about: transparency, openness, and really having the public have access to us. I've always got an open door policy. You can always call my cell phone. It's 509-850-4748. And I text all night long, so feel free to send me a text.
Oh, thank you. It's quite refreshing, and you're doing a great job, and I appreciate everything that you are doing.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. Is there any other comments from commissioners? If not, I believe we're going to go into executive session. Mr. Gonzalez?
Yes, Commissioner, we have the need for 2 executive sessions today. This first one is under RCW 42.30.110, Section 1, subsection I, to discuss with legal counsel litigation or potential litigation.
Ask the human resource.
And we're going to have our HR staff in here as well.
And I believe there's another RCW under this first executive session, too, you need to mention. It's 42.30.110.
Yes, that second one, and the first one 15 minutes, and the second one around 30 minutes is what we're proposing.
But the first executive session actually has 2 RCWs to it.
Oh, it does, excuse me. So there's, the other one is the 42.30.110, subsection G.
Yes.
To evaluate the qualifications of an applicant. So forgive me
15
for that.
minutes. All right.
Okay, yeah.
Don't like including
It's,
others that don't need to be there, so if I could address that issue with Craig and then.
I'll leave that to you guys to make that
That on the
decision.
next executive session we're going to?
That's on the second one.
Yeah.
Yeah, the first one's with Margot, is the first one we have listed. Less than 15. 15 minutes or less.
Yes.
So at this time, we'll recess into executive session.
But we could do, we could do it as two, since it's the same RCW, I'll just say him out, and then we could continue.
Okay, so we don't need to announce it twice, just
No.
Just once for 35 minutes? Okay, we'll go 35 minutes then. Okay, we've come out of executive session, we're back to regular session, and at this time, we're going to go into executive session. Mr. Gonzalez, would you announce it?
Yes, thank you, Commissioner. We're going into executive session for 35 minutes under RCW 42.30110, Section 1, subsection I, discuss with legal counsel litigation or potential litigation.
35 minutes.
Yes, sir.
Okay. At this time, we'll recess into executive session. We have come out of executive session, and we are back to regular session. At this time, I'd like to make the announcement that next week's meeting will be a night meeting on the 16th. Correct? It is the 16th, right? Yeah, the 16th. It'll be a night meeting in the commissioners' quarters here, starting at 7 o'clock. So next week's meeting. Is there any other business for the good of the county? Hearing none, this meeting is adjourned.